Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and it's been a while since I've been in front of a camera, but I do think it's time that I gave you my July wrap up. A little bit late, but we're here nonetheless. But I'm here to tell you all about the books that I've read. There are content warnings in the description box below if that's something you're interested in. And without further ado, let's get right down to the books. The first book I want to talk about is Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman, and this is a graphic novel series which follows about two boys, and the synopsis of the first one is boy meets boy, boy has a crush on boy, and then it goes from there. This series just means so much to me because it's so adorable and it's so heartwarming that every time I read it I just feel so happy, and I have to say that this book, the third one in the series, is just pure happiness distilled. It's absolutely amazing. I feel like in this one it starts to touch on a theme that gets developed a lot more in the volume afterwards. So this one is quite light, it's quite fluffy, it's quite nice. They go on a school trip, which is really cute, and it's all the friends together, and it does touch on some things that have to do with coming out, and it does touch on things that have to do with being comfortable in certain situations around certain people. But mostly I just found this one to be just a happy fluffy time, and it was enjoyable. I think it's my least favorite in the series so far for that particular reason, because it doesn't have as much substance as the other ones do, but nonetheless it was just such an enjoyable read and I had such a good time. And I have to admit, my favorite characters in the series as of now, as of reading this volume, are definitely the teachers. Really enjoyed this one. I also finished reading The Diviners by Libba Bray, and this is a book that I was buddy reading with Nicole from Who Picked This Book, so thank you Nicole for buddy reading with me. I always love our slow and languid buddy reads. So how do I talk about this one? This one is a historical fiction murder mystery supernatural kind of book. So we're following Evie, who has this particular gift, and she goes to, I believe it's New York, and she's living with her uncle there when these murders begin to happen, and her uncle has been involved in discovering why these murders are happening. And the story just goes from there. It is a bit supernatural, it is a bit creepy and atmospheric, and I have to say that's the thing I like the most about this book, is that it's so strong and so good on the atmosphere. It always manages to give that creepy tone, and it just keeps it all the way through this book. And I'm saying all the way through because this book is quite long for what it is, and even though it's such a long, slow-paced book, it was still paced really well. It never got boring. I don't think slow-paced is synonymous with bad, even though lots of times you kind of get that impression. I think this is one of those books that's slow, that's steady, but it works and it accumulates and it builds up to something. Evie was a main character that I did not expect. She's so extroverted, she's such a whirlwind of a girl, she makes bad decisions, but you can't help but feel endeared towards her. And I also really loved Jericho. He was my favorite character in this whole thing. He's so stoic, he's so introverted, and he deserves the world, and he's been through some things. But that said, there's such a huge array of characters here. There's Sam, there's Theta, there's Memphis, there's Isaiah. There's so many characters, and the point of view can flip to literally anyone, even if it's just for a single chapter. I was never confused between the characters. There's enough explanation, there's enough differentiation between each personality, but also so many points of view just works for how the story is building and fitting together. And I don't think you're going to get lost even if you struggle with multiple main characters. It just works for this story, and there's not really much more I can say. I do think this book was still middle of the road for me. I didn't feel blown away by it, but I was never at any point bored or disliking it. I was just having a good time, and I think there's a difference when it becomes with middle of the road books. It can either be middle of the road and forgettable, or it can be middle of the road and enjoyable and a good time, but just not something that blew you away. And I do think The Diviners falls into the second category, and I'm already reading the second book, so you can tell that I'm going to be continuing on with the series. That's how much I did enjoy it. The next book I read is Bridget Jones' Diary by Helen Fielding, and I buddy read this one with Lena from Lena Reads, and it was such a good time buddy reading with her. I think lots of people are going to be familiar with this book, and if not the book, then the film. So in this one we follow Bridget Jones, and it's her diary, and she's just an unmarried woman in her 30s, just living her life and going through a lot of romantic drama. It's a rom-com. It's a classic one. This is the 25th anniversary edition, so I can't believe this is 25 years old, but it was such a fun time reading this one. It does have its flaws, not everything is aged well, but it was still such good fun to read because Bridget Jones is such an iconic character, okay? She's so relatable with some of the thoughts that she has. She's such a mess of a woman, just an absolute mess, but it's so enjoyable to read about her just being absolutely ridiculous. She's got a great band of friends around her, and I think I really enjoyed the friends and reading about her friends and the ridiculous situations she gets herself in. I do wish that we spent more time with the love interest. In this one there are multiple love interests. She has different experiences with different men and we get to hear about it, but there was the one that was like the one in the end, and I wish we had a bit more time to develop that chemistry and bond between them, even though we do get to see certain scenes which are great. And there's some characters in this that are absolutely terrible, but they're intentionally terrible. Like the mum, oh my gosh, she is out of this world awful. But it was just such a laugh to hear about all of these experiences. I also do think that you need to be aware that in this one, Bridget Jones has some really awful concepts of what a healthy body is. And she does a lot of dieting, some really outrageous dieting, and at the beginning of every single chapter she talks about how many cigarettes she smoked a day and how many alcohol units she's drank and what her weight is. So if that's something that's going to be a problem for you, I would just be aware of that going in. She talks about it a lot, and it does get talked about within the book, as in this is not a good concept of dieting, but it's still very prominent and a big part of the book, and I would say that's the only thing that hasn't really aged all that well. But all in all, I was reading this while I was moving, while I was finishing up a job and about to start another, and it was a very stressful period of my life, and this was the balm that I needed. It was just light-hearted, it was ridiculously funny, and I think if you just want a good rom-com time, then read this one. It's very interesting having seen the film and reading it because there are so many very good similarities. It was such a good adaptation, but there is a difference that I really liked, and you'd have to read it to find out what that is. So really enjoyed reading this one. Now we get to talk about my favorite books. So I read An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. Finally, I just picked it up and just got on with it, and I loved this book. 5 stars, new favorite. So in this one, we're following this couple that are married. They get married fairly young, and we see them get married, and then the man gets accused of a crime that he did not commit, and he gets sentenced to jail, and it's about their relationship as he's in jail and what it means to maintain a relationship with someone while they're in jail, but equally so while they are in jail for something they did not commit. And it is a black couple, so racism does come into play with this one. I thought that the author did such a fantastic job with bringing about this very complex situation and explaining the reasons why it is complex. If I give you that premise, you already understand the difficulty of knowing that you've got an innocent man who is your husband in jail and having to contend with the fact that he doesn't deserve to be there, having to contend with the fact that you don't deserve to be separated from this person you're newly wedded to, but also understanding that to keep a relationship in such a trying situation is so difficult, especially when it's a fledgling new one. And it does get a bit complicated with how they both have mental health going on, and one person is going in one direction with their lives and the other is a bit stagnant when they were just, at the brink of, your 20s where anything can happen. But it also talks about history, black culture, what it means to be a black woman and to be dedicated and loving to a man, but also equally what it means to be a black man who, because of his race, is in a position where he shouldn't be in. And while it contends with those two things, it also talks about black history. We get to see both sides of their parents' relationships and how even though this is a matter between them two, it becomes a family matter. In black culture, what happens within the family stays within the family often, but it's also the whole family's business and everybody gets a say and everybody gets an opinion. You can very much see that happening in this book too. The writing is absolutely amazing. You've got 3 characters' points of view, and I'm not going to say these characters make the right decisions all the time. I'm not going to say that characters are blameless or they should be blamed. I always feel like with the decisions they make, it's a consequence of their situations and who they are. And they're not perfect. None of them are perfect. And yet they all feel so real and so alive that they could come out of this book and I would swear those are real people, because she has written them fantastically. The writing was just amazing. The setup was amazing. It's just so complex and so deep that it's fantastic, and I really just recommend that everybody read this book. It's absolutely brilliant. It won the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2019, and I absolutely see why. I will be reading more from Tayari Jones in the future. I do think I could predict what the ending would be, but that did not matter because there were times where I doubted the outcome, and I feel like the way you got there, it was not easy. It had to be earned. So this book, go and read it. The next one, which was also 5 stars, new favorite, was Open Water by Caleb Azumah Nelson, and this is a Black British literary romance book. And I'm going to tell you some things about it, and you're going to read it anyway, okay? So the first thing that I have to say is that this one is basically about a black man who meets a black woman, and their circumstances are not ideal when they meet, but it's about their romance and what it means to be black in Britain, and a black young man in Britain, because it's from the male perspective. And it's written in second person, but I don't want that to put you off. It's entirely written in second person, but I think that was only in the book's favor because it just positioned you so closely to the main character that you can't help but feel what he feels and experience what he experiences. It was such a mind-blowing experience to me to have a romance and to have a black woman be a big part of that romance, and for me to still relate to the black man more than anything else. The black man is a reader, he writes, he's a photographer, and he's really into music, and those are all things that interest me so very much. So of course I was feeling very closely aligned to him, and also his experience as a black British person, feeling very closely aligned to that, especially as a black British person who has some of their identity within another country. And the main character in this book has it in Ghana, I'm Jamaica, but it was still feeling that connection. And it's very much literary. The writing, oh my goodness, it is so beautiful that I wish I could have drank the words down and put them in my soul and kept them there forever. It was just absolutely lyrical, beautiful imagery and writing. The way that he talks about art and how much it means to him. The way that he talks about the anxiety of being black in Britain and just that fear and that worry and the experiences that he has throughout this book. It just put into words those emotions so starkly and so realistically that I couldn't help but feel like this book was just part of me written into words. And I don't think everybody is going to have that same closeness to this book. I don't think everybody's just going to feel as incredibly seen by this book as I did. But I think because I felt so seen by it, it's still a very important one for other people to read, because then you can understand someone else's experience. Caleb Azumah Nelson has just penned it down perfectly. And in terms of the romance, it might seem a bit overdone sometimes, the way that he falls so instantly and so deeply, but it never felt like insta-love. It just felt so realistic. Finding that person, finding that connection, and then building on it, but being afraid to build on it at the same time. I don't know. I just found that to be such a true portrayal of romance. I think it handled that very well too. I feel like it's a very character-driven book. It's really about him processing things internally, but it's just worth reading, and I really recommend it. Really loved this book. The next book I read is Kololo Hill by Neema Shah, and I buddy read this one with Annie from Annie Naughty, so do check out her channel. She reads so much. It's absolutely unbelievable, especially if you want queer recommendations and science fiction, fantasy. She has got you covered. But we buddy read Kololo Hill, and this was such an enlightening read to me. I learned so very much. It's about Ugandan Asians living in Uganda during 1972, where there was a law decreed that all Ugandan Asians had to leave the country immediately. They had to pack up all their belongings, leave behind their money, leave behind everything, and just leave Uganda and go somewhere else, which of course happened fairly recently, 1972, and I knew absolutely nothing about it, and the way that so many people suffered as they were kicked out of the country was just absolutely horrifying to read about. The experiences and the way they had to live for so long trying to catch flights, the situations and the difficulty with passports and such. I knew absolutely nothing about it, and reading this historical fiction novel really taught me a lot. I think it did a very good job of depicting the situation and the strife that a lot of the characters in this book had to go through, but obviously also people must have had to go through in real life. And I like how it showed life before that event happened, during the event, and of course also what happened afterwards. So we could see some of the long time effects that this law has had on people's lives. I think it was nice to follow these characters in this family and seeing what they did decide to do, what they didn't decide to do. Their personalities led to them wanting different things and making different decisions, and I felt like that indecision and also the way that each of them wanted to try something different as an approach to how to handle what they've been told to do was very realistic. I do have to say that I found the book to be a bit slow in that it didn't capture me completely, and I struggled with the ending. The ending felt a bit abrupt, it felt a bit unfinished, and it just didn't really end, not in the way that I wanted it to, but it just didn't end in a very satisfying way. So this book didn't manage to steal my whole heart, and I didn't love it entirely, but I still really recommend it just as a way for you to learn more about the situation, to have your eyes open to all the troubles that people have gone through. And because of how much I learned from this book and how much it educated me and also spurred me on to do some research of my own, I just owe this book a lot. And also this is a review copy, so this is actually what the finished cover looks like. I also read Monster by Michael Grant. This was a buddy read with Gaia from Gaia Athena. I always love buddy reading with her. We've done so many over the years, but we both did not like this book. So Monster is the first book in a sequel series to the Gone series by Michael Grant, which is one of my all-time favorite series. But unfortunately, this first book in the sequel series was a huge disappointment, and I did not like it at all. It's hard to tell you about this one without spoiling the original series, so I'm just not going to tell you anything about it, but I'm just going to list off the reasons why I didn't like it. And there are two main reasons why I didn't like it. The first one had to do with world building. One of the things I hate the most is when the first series establishes a world, it establishes these rules and it sticks by them and everything makes sense. But then years later you create a sequel series and the rules that you created in the first series don't quite align to what you want to have happen in the sequel series. So you break a lot of the rules and you just kind of ignore the science that you've laid out for 6 books beforehand and create new ones. And that's what this book did, and I really did not appreciate that. I hated how it just made things from the Gone series irrelevant, just like that. The second thing it did was it made characters alive that were previously dead because it wanted to play around with them some more. I hate when that happens, especially when they do it just for the purpose of, hey, it's a sequel series, we need these characters alive again. Let the dead stay dead. I also think it brought back characters from the previous series and they just weren't the same. They had different personalities, they made decisions that they never would have based on what we learned from them before. I didn't like that either. We also get introduced to a lot of new characters, which is fine. I'm all for new characters, and I have to say, the new character that I liked the most was Amo. He was quite cute, he was quite adorable, and I really liked him and the friendship that he struck up with a certain someone. Won't say a name because I don't want to spoil anything. But for the rest of the other new characters, it wasn't the best. And I also think this book struggled a bit from having diversity just for the sake of ticking a box of having diversity. As well as that, we have a black character, and the black character has been in the previous series before, so I was like, oh, you know, you can't get this representation wrong. But then that character is compared to looking like Medusa a whole lot because of dreadlocks. The plot in this one is a lot more action heavy and action based than the previous series was. I mean, the previous series had plenty of action in it. Yes, it did. But this one has less of the like mind games, thinking about it, psychological aspect, but it has a lot more of just action after action. and it got a bit exhausting and it wasn't the best action, and yeah, didn't like the new characters' motivations. There just wasn't really much that I liked about this book, so unfortunately I will not be continuing the sequel series, and we're just going to pretend this book didn't exist and it was just the main series that's in existence. Last but not least, I listened to an audiobook. I listened to the audiobook of Child 44 by Tom Rob Smith, and I listened to this for a challenge where I exchanged favourite books with my best friend and we each read each other's favourite book. So if you want to watch that video, I'll have a link to it down below. And also I listened on Script, and if you want 63 days of Script, I've got a link down below that you can click and claim your free days. But Child 44 is a thriller that happens in Soviet Russia, and it has to do with a person who's part of the police force that they have in existence there, and he realizes that he might be disillusioned and not understanding what the system is really doing, and at the same time there's a serial killer on the loose, and he kind of realizes that maybe his system is not the best for catching serial killers out, so he wants to do it himself. And I thought this thriller was really, really good, and I was very, very impressed by it. I think it did a very good job of talking about Stalinist Russia and what that was really like, and the suffering that lots of people had to go through during that time period with that dictatorship. And it does a very good job of showing, you know, LGBT plus people and what it was like for them under this rule, and what it was like for women under this rule, and just different things, and the ruthlessness that really went on. It also did a very good job of building a steady and suspenseful plot. The events built off of each other very well and amounted to something at the end of it, and I thought that was all done very, very well. But what I applaud this thriller for the most is making very realistic characters, and also making very realistic female characters. I know that the thriller genre sometimes struggles with that a lot, and also having these characters develop to a large degree, but having that character development be integral and a main part of the plot. I think it all came together so well, and I was just so impressed by the end of it that I want to continue reading this thriller series. So those were the books that I read in July, and my thoughts and feelings on all of them. Please let me know in the comment section down below. Have you read any of these books, and what did you think of them? And I know July was a while ago, but if you stretch your mind back, what was your favorite read of July? Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't you forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!